This is Brent Richardson, and welcome to the Business Minutia Podcast, where our focus is on the details of business that are often passed over by traditional classes and leadership training. We focus on the stories of real people who have tried, failed, and learned through their experiences and are willing to share their lessons with others. Jamie, how many times have we had people ask questions, how does your relationship and your family work with as much travel as Brent deals with?
Yeah, but for us, the travel, it was difficult when the kids were younger, but as they got older, it actually became part of the cadence of our life.
And I think it switched a little bit in 2020 with no travel. And I hadn't really traveled much the year before, but there's not been much travel for me.
And I'm not sure if you missed traveling or I missed you traveling more.
But a little bit of both. And that sounds bad.
It does.
We were just having this conversation last night about, there's the value of taking care of yourself. Right? You have to take care of yourself.
Right.
You have to be mentally, physically, spiritually healthy yourself to be able to contribute and help other people.
Right.
And I think one of the things that we just kind of built naturally, organically, a cadence for ourselves. And I think cadence will come up many times in this episode. We want to talk a little bit about work-life balance. And we've talked about this in the past, but we covered it with Michael Fleming, who covered it as a chaplain,
right,
as kind of a counselor, giving us some perspective of some horror stories of what can go wrong and his experience there. But it was really making a case for why work-life balance matters.
Right. And the way he said it is, if anything is going wrong at home, it affects your work. And if anything's going wrong at work, it can affect your home life.
Yes. And we got into a little bit of why, but we didn't cover a ton of, we got into why. We didn't cover a ton of how. So we want to start a little bit on the how side. And where I would begin is to talk about having defined goals. Defined goals for yourself, defined objectives for yourself, defined goals and objectives for your business, defined goals and objectives for your employees. If you've got folks in a team that you're leading. And then I wouldn't go so far as define goals and objectives for your family, although I think you can do that. It feels a little weird to me to get the family together and talk about,
family mission statements.
But
there are people that do that.
There are people who do that, and I'm not suggesting that that's not important. It's just a little nerdy to write it out on a whiteboard. But there are things I think at least you think about, right? That you say, okay, in general, we have an idea. This is kind of the goals of how we want to operate, and it's in the family side, you just like to spend enough time with your kids that they're not psychopaths. There's a certain cadence and rhythm. You don't want to be the dad that never shows up to a soccer game. You don't want to be the mom that is 3 sheets to the wind at 10 a.m., because you're just tired of these kids and you can't handle anymore. So there are certain boundary conditions, I think, that everybody has for themselves.
We can align on that.
That everybody has for themselves. But you want to set some goals for yourself. We just talked about this with Ken Yankee. We were talking about kind of having the why and the how and the what for your life and the value of for your work life. And I think the value of that is having these kind of boundary conditions for yourself. And what I mean by that is you need to define what your non-negotiables are. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, like if you're defining your non-negotiables with your boss, it would be my kid has a soccer game every Thursday at 6:00 and it's non-negotiable. I will be there.
Right.
For some people, it is being there for family dinner. Some people, it's dropping kids off at school. For some people, it is the bowling league or anything like that.
Yeah, and you're the only person who knows these things.
That's right.
And you have to define, these are the things that are non-negotiable for me, right?
Right.
And they're different for phases of your life.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, before we had kids, the non-negotiables were way different.
Yeah.
There were a lot less, right?
Right.
There were a lot less. And now, as you have family and as your things are pulling at you from outside, maybe if it's not if you have a family, I've seen single folks at work that are very high in leadership, but they have a lot of involvement in nonprofits and in other things where they're donating their time. Those start to become non-negotiables.
Right. For you, one of the non-negotiables is your summer travel when we're allowed to travel again, the summer travel with Wonder Voyage.
Yeah. So Wonder Voyage is a nonprofit that I work with, and I've worked with for almost 20 years now. And it's a couple trips a summer that I take, a few meetings throughout the year as I serve on the board, and a few trips. And I've had a couple cases work-wise where people would be like, hey, you sure travel a lot, ha, ha, ha. those are non-negotiables for me.
Right.
The trips that I get to take to impact people's lives in the summer are so rewarding, and they give you this sense of purpose, like you're accomplishing something that's bigger than just the widget that you're working on. Those are non-negotiables for me.
Right. And then I have the non-negotiable time of in the morning, I'm going to get my writing time and I need everybody to leave me alone. And for some time.
How well does that work?
Well, not real well in 2020.
Yeah, right.
And for some people, it's just getting to the gym. A certain time they need to hit the gym every day to stay on that.
Yep. And so the point of this is you're using this to set some boundaries. This is establishing kind of the left side and the right side of your lane, so to speak, right? We talked about that a little bit with Ken in his episode of getting a lane for yourself and staying in your lane. And the value of this is when it comes time to say no. And again, phases of your career, phases of your life. They were early on in my career. I didn't need to say no because they're going to give you some small task and they're just trying to get you to add some value to the company. Do something basic over here. Your responsibilities are pretty minimal when you're first starting off in a company. As a business owner, it would be different, right? It may be inverted where you're like hot and heavy, full into it at the opening, and so you're going to need to. So each person's going to be a little bit different, but either way, you need to establish some boundaries for yourself and say, here's the lane, and use that to help you distinguish what you should and should not do, and things that you're going to have to say no to. Early in my career, I didn't have to. As my responsibilities got greater, as I started getting not just one project, but 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 projects, or a team of people working 5 or 6 projects, now there's enough pulls on my time that I have to say no to things. I think that's very important to learn. The skill to learn to say no. And I think we think that we're going to aggravate people and they're going to hate us. There is definitely you can say no without aggravating people. It's perfectly fine to tell somebody, hey man, I like you, but I've only got so many hours in a day and this is going to be low on my priority list. Don't take it personal, but there's no way I'm going to be able to get this done. I'd like to help you with it, but I got these other things to do. Now, if you want to go with me, if you feel like this is something my team has to do, and I'd be happy to go sit with you and talk with our up our chain of command and talk about the priorities. Now, if you're a business owner, you don't have to go through any of that. You just say no. Nah, I don't do that.
Right. And for me, I mean, when our kids were young, I fell into the category of being a stay-at-home mom. So I was saying yes to everything and helping out the schools with everything. What they didn't understand, respect, I didn't verbalize was that I was a work-from-home mom. Yeah. So I also had my work that I needed to get done.
They assumed you were just twiddling your thumbs and watching all my children.
Right.
Yeah.
So I finally had to sit down, and when we actually moved out to this house and started homeschooling, I had my priorities, my top 4 priorities, and everything that came in that was either a yes or no opportunity, I would make sure they aligned with my priorities. And if they were not in my first 4 priorities, it was a no. And I just told people, I have my priorities as this for this year, and I just can't. I can't go outside of that boundary. And they respected that.
And you have to get this part. I can't have a conversation with you about work-life balance if you can't say no to things.
Right.
Right. You have to learn this skill set. Now, am I going to be able to tell you what you shouldn't say no to? No, you have to sort that out for yourself based on the phase of where you are in your career and the season that you're in. So let's talk a little bit about seasons. I think this is also an important thing to learn about or think about or talk about when it comes to work-life balance. What do I mean by seasons?
Well, there are a lot of different ways that you can look at seasons, because there are seasons to your life. There is single life, and then there is married life, and then there's married with kids life, and sometimes there's single life mixed back in there. There's all sorts of seasons to your actual life itself. But then there's also seasons to your work life. There are seasons where you are super, super busy and high demand, and then there are seasons where you're not so much in demand.
Yeah, I heard a leadership instructor one time teaching on this, and he was saying, when things are not going well, stay down there. Grab a rag, grab a mop, go ahead and clean the floor while you're down there. Take a break. That's not the time to be in a hurry and to be, pumping in double time. Because the time you're pumping in, you're not getting any return on that investment because things are not going well.
Right.
They're not going good. You need to double time it when things are going well. When you're at the top of your game and things are there, you're getting a lot more efficiency from the time that you're putting in. I found that to be true. When things are going well, I really want to double down. And we have a tendency to coast, right? I do, at least. Things are going well. Oh, this is great. I'm going to take a break, take a vacation. And okay, I'm not suggesting you don't take a vacation, but you need to be dedicating some thought and time to how to optimize the fact that you're on top. That's what I mean by seasons.
Right. Right, and Brett Boyd came on the podcast recently, and he was talking about he is in the season right now of starting a business, and that his wife has been incredibly supportive of the hours he's had to put in to make that happen. That is a season, and hopefully that season won't last too long.
Right, and I think if you can kind of see, okay, and there are people out there that are like, all right, yeah, but I just work like that all the time, and that, okay, eventually the wheels are going to come off.
Right.
Like you can't run an engine full capacity all the time, right? The thing is eventually going to start rattling and making noise. You've got to be able to anticipate, and I think you get better at this over time, the ability to look and say, okay, the wheels aren't rattling yet, but I can tell they will, right? And people who are really good at this identify and have those triggers early on, so it's the first sign of a problem, they can address it. People who struggle with it more, they don't know it until there's a comedian that I love that had this joke one time about he got two emotions from his father. That's the only emotions he's capable of, and that's rage and suppressed rage.
Right.
You don't want to be the person that just bottles everything up and then just erupts on people, right?
Right.
That's not healthy, and it's a good way to get fired, right? So you don't want that to happen. You need to be able to anticipate, okay, this isn't working.
And you've got to find your warning signs, because everybody has those warning signs.
What's yours?
I know what yours is. You get an eye twitch. And you can see it, I can see it, everybody can see that you're getting that little eye twitch.
It's a common interview question I'll ask people. How will you know when you're overloaded?
Right.
Because if you don't have, if your answer to that question is schedule starts to slip, I am not hiring you.
No
chance.
Right.
That's not going to be, because failing is not an option. This is not an option. It's a matter of how, I need an earlier indicator than that.
Well, and for me, I know that when I start feeling used, then I know that I can't expect everyone else to be investing in me to make me feel better, right?
Right.
That's just setting yourself up for failure.
Right.
So you've got to figure out how I feel less used today is by giving back to myself in some way.
Yeah. And you can't rely on your spouse for these things either, right? I am probably the worst at identifying very obvious communication things that you're trying to tell me. You're like, well, I told you, I said this, and this. That didn't mean anything to me. You have to grab me both hands around the head and say, I feel used. Right. Then I go, oh, you're talking to me. I thought you were talking to the wall and the reef over here. Right. I'm not paying any attention. I'm just oblivious to those things because in my head, it's just like, what's the monkeys with the hats and they're tap dancing? That's kind of what goes on in my brain most of the time. Now, I'm actually thinking about something all the time,
right.
But I'm not thinking about picking up the hint that you're dropping. You need to be really clear.
Right.
Yeah. I'm talking to you.
Yeah. I got it.
And for business owners, it's a little bit different because you control the seasons in many ways.
Right.
Right. You can dictate the terms of this, or you can at least look and see how your schedule and how the flow is. Every business is going to have seasons of ups and downs.
Right.
When things are down, like if you boom during the holiday season for some reason, like that's not the time to be taking a bunch of breaks.
Right.
That's probably an unpopular opinion, but if I'm making my money in retail and during a holiday season, like I'm taking Christmas break with my family after, or
right.
I'm going to find some. Why does it have to be? I mean, peace. I love tradition, but that's a good way to balance. If that's the time to hit it hard, not to be taking time off.
Right. I mean, if I am a single mom and I have the opportunity to take a shift on Christmas Day where they're paying me double. Santa Claus is coming to town on the 26th.
Exactly. And I think I don't know why.
It's okay.
Why can you not flex and adapt like that?
Yeah.
I mean, tradition could be a little, I don't think we need to be quite so religious about it. I think we can have a little bit of flex there. But you do need to take the time. You can't just mow through that. And then, oh, by the way, during the downtime, I'm going to use that time to double up there too. The wheels are going to come off, man. That's
right.
not going to go good.
And if you happen to be in a business that is just steady all the time and there's no real ups or downs and you're just kind of coasting all the time, then you set your seasons. You find a time to hit the pause button.
Right.
You've got to.
Yeah. So we've hit the pause button. Now what do we do? And I think we've talked about this on the podcast before about how everybody recovers and restores their soul differently, right? And I think you've got to have some balance with, again, you've got family and you got other things that you're committed to. You need to make sure those are in your lane, right? If you've already made your own priorities and say, this is important to me, these are my non-negotiables. My work with this nonprofit is a non-negotiable. The time I spend with my kids is a non-negotiable. The time I spend with my wife is a non-negotiable. The success for me in my business and work there is non-negotiable. Make that list for yourselves, and you may look at those and be like, it's too much. It's just one too many. I got to figure out what I'm gonna negotiate out. Right. What am I gonna have to? Or as Bob Goff says, you need to quit something every Thursday.
Right.
It's his mechanism, I think, of keeping this balance and not getting stuck in things that he just doesn't have time for anymore. Because otherwise things keep coming in and nothing goes off. Something has to fall off the table to give more space on the table for other things. So you've got this time. How do you recover? And this is a self-awareness kind of thing, and everybody's a little bit different. What is it for you?
Well, and sometimes you can get real lazy about it, and you can be like, okay, well, I'm just going to binge on a show. Well, that might be cool, but did you walk away feeling better than when you walked in?
Right.
Because you need something that's actually restoring you.
Yeah.
Right? For me, it's often getting lost in a book. It is taking a hot soak with a book. It is, sometimes it's watching a TV show, but it's just not like for hours and hours and hours on end.
Right.
Taking walks is huge for me. I need that in my life.
Right.
Sunshine.
Watching shows that create a self-reflection for me, those are healthy.
Right.
And then there's times when I'm like, I don't want to do anything like that. I just want to watch something mindless. That's okay. But those tend to not restore me.
Right.
You're right. They're just time killers, but they're not necessarily adding any value or making me feel restored. The things that help me, for example, mud, oddly enough. And I don't like being muddy, but I enjoy playing in the mud, biking in the mud.
Now, when you say playing in the mud, you don't mean like playing in the mud.
All of the above, man. Playing football in the mud, getting muddy.
Right. You're not making mud pies.
Dirt bikes in the mud.
Right, exactly.
I have a 4-wheel drive utility vehicle. Playing in the mud there is a blast. Fishing, being outside, campfires, that type of thing.
And woodworking is
one that I've kind of replaced a lot of that. I don't get as much mud time anymore because my knees just don't work the way they used to. But woodworking has been one of those things. I had somebody who was on a conference call last week, and they said, "When did that? Have you always just enjoyed that?" And I hadn't. I picked it up from. I had worked on a few projects, and I was reading this Brene Brown book. I know we've talked about this before on the podcast, but it's such a good point. And she talks about healthy play.
Right.
And people who are really happy are involved regularly in healthy play. And and one of the things she talks about, I was like, well, what does healthy play mean for me? I was like, oh, it's mountain biking. And one of the things that she had mentioned was it's a thing you do, you lose track of time.
Right.
And for me, woodworking is that. I can work on a project and be doing something and just totally lose track of the day. And I turn around and it's healthy. I feel like I've accomplished something. I've built something. We have furniture in our home that, people come in and go, holy cow, where did you get that? That looks impressive. I built that sucker. You're welcome, right? You feel some sense of accomplishment, like you've done something. Those are restorational for me.
Well, and it's interesting. It's something that I'm having to talk to our kids about constantly because they have healthy play in their lives and they want to make that play their career.
Yeah.
And I have found that for me specifically, if I try to make the thing that makes me lose track of time into a money-making endeavor, it often takes the joy out of it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I think there needs to be healthy play that is just completely selfish and no ends to it. It's just because I want to.
And I was having at a group chat, I was having some discussion with some folks here recently about selling furniture and making this stuff, and we weren't talking directly about making it a business. Although one of my friends that does quite a bit of woodworking, he's way better than I am, and he could sell his stuff. But even there, I've done some math on it. And I'm like, yeah, you could sell it. The problem is, when I'm woodworking, I want it to take as long as possible.
Right.
I want if I don't like the piece. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to resurface this entire thing and I'm going to do it again.
You're not looking for efficiency.
That's right. I'm not looking for, that's not a good profitable business to run. I'm doing it for me.
Right.
It's just a good restorational thing for me. So can I just do that all the time? No, I think you have to find a cadence.
Right.
You have to find a good cadence. I can't do that every day. I don't have time for that every day, right? I need to balance that. And then doing some of this from a podcast perspective, this stuff is a non-negotiable for me. So I want to spend at least, we've committed, we're going to do this for 2 years. I think that's important. So I want to do that. And then I'm doing so you have to balance your time and figure out what cadence makes sense for you. You're the only person that will know that.
So let's talk about the mental discipline aspect of all of this.
Yeah, I think there is definitely an element of mental discipline, and we're going to get into more about what prevents people from doing this. And I think a mental discipline is a big part of it. which is, you've got to be all in on any one phase. So when it's time for work, and this is way more exacerbated there's a dollar word, in 2020 in the work from home era, right? Is you need to be all in with whatever thing you're working on. So when I'm working on work, I need to be all in on that. Right. When I get distracted by podcast stuff, or when I get distracted by kid stuff or woodworking stuff, then I am not being the employee that my company deserves during that time, and I'm robbing them. I can't do that. I'm straight stealing from them. I can't do that. So I need to be all in on that. And in the same way, I think people have more problem with this. There's got to be a boundary where I go, that's it. That's enough work for the day, and I got to be all in with my family. You need to be all in there too, right? Whatever it is you're doing, you need to be all in on it. I don't think you can do. Okay, could you do it? Probably. I'm going to go out on, this is probably a unpopular opinion. If you're sitting there staring at your phone while you're with your family, waiting for it to blink again for another communication or some other thing, that's not healthy, man.
Right.
That's not a good strategy. I've been that way. You've caught me with it. Say, hey, I thought you told me we were going to sit on the porch and have a drink and relax and talk, and you're staring at your phone. And right after that, what did we do? We made a no electronic weekend, because it was more for me than it was the kids. But it becomes a challenge. You have to be all in whatever you're doing.
Be present.
You need to be present.
That's the common term now, is be present.
Absolutely.
So what do you do when your boss doesn't necessarily respect the downtime? If they're all the time, if they're go, 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 go.
Yeah, that's tough. And I have had one case like that where I had a boss who really created work-life balance problems for me.
Right.
And I, I'll tell you what I did well in that time, and then I'll tell you what I'd have done differently.
Okay.
I had good conversations about what work needed to be done and what the finish line looked like. I've always been good at that. Let's talk about what success looks like for this role. And when you really want to be focused on what the finish line looks like. I think that's important. If I were to do it again, I'm going to tell you how I did that. But if I were going to do it again and go back, talk to the younger me, I would say more of that. Be a little more prescriptive, right? Because it wound up creating more conflict because I wasn't prescriptive enough. But what I did well was I was able to really draw a line and say, here's the finish line. This is what the result looks like. We're all in agreement. We're both in agreement, boss. This is what success is going to look like for us. You could have a boss situation that creates pain for you here. My recommendation would be have a good, solid alignment on what the result looks like. What does the finish line look like? What does success for you look like with your boss? And then how much room do you have in terms of the autonomy of how things get done? Some bosses won't. More of a dictator style boss, they won't. And you know what? That's okay. I've seen dictator style bosses that are outrageously successful, and their teams will love them. As long as you're aligned that, hey, this is the room I have in terms of how things get done and how much wiggle room I have, then you're aligned on that. And what I mean by that is the how might be you're here from 8 to 5 and you do what I tell you to. That's the worst case scenario, right? But some people like that. They just like to punch the clock and go do that. I don't. I want flexibility in my time to go adjust and do things how I think are most efficient. Right. So that's something I think that's just an example. And you'll have bosses sometimes that will be that way. The key is upfront alignment.
Right. And along the same line, sometimes there are jobs that are, as you call, firefighting jobs. As in there's always some fire to put out. There's always like demand, and everything is reactive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And those type of jobs, do you still say you just look for the end point and you focus on that? I mean, how do you know when to call it a day?
Still have to have a success measure. You still have to have some measure of this is what good means. If you're working reactive kind of work queue type of stuff, you still have to say, well, the goal is going to be to work 20 of these requests a week, right? Or 10 of those or 15. And then, you know what? I'm going to get real strategic about how I can get those 10 or 15 done. And then I'm going to start to get it done in less than 40 hours a week. And you know what I'm going to do the extra time? Whatever I want.
Right.
I'm going to go get better. I'm going to I'm going to grow. I'm going to learn. I'm going to tackle new things. I'm going to go use that extra time. Right. Which is why I don't like being dictated how, because then you take that empowerment that I gain to go learn and get better and grow. You know, when you're dictating that to me, I'm just hoping that you're guiding me in the right direction. I like to have a little more say over the direction I'm going.
Right. Now, those are a lot of the work discussions on the work-life balance, but there's also that life part, that family part, that whatever else is in your personal life part, that has to be discussed. And I know for me, one of my biggest pet peeves, and I don't know if it's as much with guys as it is with women, but there are a lot of women that think, my family is what keeps me balanced.
Yeah.
And I love having conversations with women. I'm like, okay, so when you say family, if you're talking about spouse and kids and all of that, what happens when those kids are grown and out of the house?
Yeah.
Who are you then?
That's right.
Because whoever you are then, and if you have no idea who that person is, you're already out of balance.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you're trying to figure out where your balance might be, starting there and figuring out what I would be doing if all my kids were out of the house, if my husband was out of the house, if all of this is going on, whatever you would want to spend your time on there is probably that play that you would need to be working on right now.
It could be, and I would even go so far as to say it doesn't matter whether this is not a man, woman, husband, wife thing.
Yeah.
I know wives that work and husbands that stay home.
That's right.
As well. So this goes both ways.
Oh, yeah.
And you're really talking about making sure you don't lose your identity.
Right.
Right. You need to make sure you know who you are. I would go so far as to say, even if you have, like, in a case you're talking about, you have a primary breadwinner and someone that's staying home with the kids or staying home in general or something like that. The primary person there, and this breadwinner sounds so chauvinistic, but you know what I'm saying.
I do.
It's not a male. It's not a male-female thing. But if you have that person that is the person that's going off and working, that person also has to think about this.
That's exactly
because
right.
You know what? That job you're in, gone tomorrow.
Exactly right.
Can disappear tomorrow, and it not be your fault.
And when we're at parties, when we're meeting new people, the first question people always ask is, "What do you do for a living?"
Right.
That's because we define each other.
That's
by
how we
that.
operate. You're right. Yeah, it's kind of this lifeboat principle. We decide, well, I got to make sure I know who gets voted off first. Is there a doctor? Okay, I'm behind the doctor. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be crazy if you introduced yourself? I'm Brent, and I like woodworking.
Right. Yeah.
Do you do that for a
People
living?
would think
No,
you're
but
weird.
that's what I like.
Yeah, right.
That's what I like.
They'd be, what's wrong with that guy? He's weird. He doesn't get the social structure of how this works. All we need to know, he's not at the doctor. We put him at the bottom. First one off the lifeboat.
Right. But I think there is something about understanding your own self-identity outside of titles and outside of roles and outside of other relationships.
So you're talking about what happens when the kids are out of the house? What happens when that job is not there?
That's exactly right.
Is your identity all wrapped up in that? Because you know what? It ain't going to happen forever. Eventually that job's going to change. You're going to retire, or you're going to be forced to retire.
Right.
And now you're going to be going, what do I do now? Who am I? Start working on that now.
Right.
Start carving out some things for yourself that you derive some sense of purpose from now.
Right. And if you don't like who you are outside of those roles and those responsibilities and those titles, that's probably something you want to examine now before you're alone with yourself too long.
Hey, it's a season of resolutions. Maybe you need to think through that, come up with a game plan. I agree. And the funny thing, I'll hear people say, like, when I'll ask them, like, what do you do when I'm trying to get to know them really well? I'm like, what do you do in your free time?
Right.
Like, what's the thing you enjoy doing, you're passionate about? Because I'll tell you this. I don't know if I've shared this before. I have this theory. And I don't remember what book I got this concept from, but I've certainly seen it to be true, and I've expounded on it. Everybody's normal until you get to know them.
Right.
And so nobody's normal. Everybody's weird.
Right.
And then with people, especially people who have some expendable income, the weird factor magnifies.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The weird stuff starts to really magnify.
Yeah.
And everybody's this way. And if you don't think that your friend or somebody you know is that way, because you don't know them well enough yet. But as you really start to get to know people, eventually and you know how you can tell when you learn this thing about the person and you go, oh, that's weird. Then that's it.
Right.
Right. And everybody's got something
for
that's
sure.
unique or different that people are go, oh, that's strange. Right. So when I ask people, what is that thing that you do that's like that? And then the answers, a lot of times I'll just get, I just like my family. Just spending my time with my family that's all the balance I need. Okay, that's cool. Good answer. Nice. Good job.
Right.
I don't believe you.
Right.
I think you're probably wheels off when the kids leave the house. That's my fear. Or you're just not willing to share, which might also, that's fine too, right? But I'm just saying, I'm highlighting this to say, bro, okay, you need to, ladies and gentlemen, please recognize that you cannot help people when and you can't be the most of what you can be for your employer or as a business owner or whatever you're doing if you're not mentally healthy.
Right.
And mental health is strongly associated to this taking care of you. What is the thing that you do that's healthy play? This is important. And if you're neglecting it, eventually the wheels will start to shake and come off.
Right. And a lot of times people will also consider their healthy play to be more numbing mechanisms, the people who, well, I drink a lot, or
right.
all of these
Right.
these things that can just kill your body.
Right.
And are you feeling better after you're done
Right.
than when you started?
It's the same as the mindless TV stuff we're talking
Exactly
about,
right.
right?
Exactly right.
Is it nice once in a while? For sure, right? Is it really healthy for you? Or is it really moving the needle for you? No, clearly not.
So if you're on your journey of self-awareness and you're trying to find these little things in your own life, what about anybody you're living with, your partner or roommate or even a friend? If they don't get it, how do you help them get it? Do you need to help them get it? Or how do you...
I mean, this is all about just communication. And it is one of the biggest thing I think that prevents people's success here. You can have spouse issues, roommate issues, family issues like that that can cause problems. And I think it starts with a conversation about why you're trying to do what you're doing. And if you're really having issues in this space, you got to see a counselor.
Right.
Certainly, I'm thinking about the couples that that are running into this problem, and you see it. You see scorekeeping. We talk about quite a bit.
Right.
And I don't know how many times how many marriage couples have we counseled over the years? And one of the most common things that you see, and it is, this is not a marriage couple counseling podcast, but the fact is it does reveal show up as a big problem for work-life balance.
Right.
And I've seen employees quit and leave their jobs and we lose the person because they were out of balance at home.
Right.
And they had marriage issues and they had spouse issues, and there was a lot of scorekeeping that takes place. Right. What is scorekeeping?
Scorekeeping is, you took Tuesday off to go do what you want to do. You owe me a night. Yeah, right. You owe me.
Right.
You went on a trip. You went to do whatever. You owe me now.
This is a tough one because we're talking about balance, and in a marriage, you need to balance and negotiate and have this kind of balance in place. Okay, my theory on this is that you should be out of balance. You should be ahead. I should do everything I can to make sure you're healthy, it needs to be skewed that way.
Right.
If we're gonna scorekeep, I want you to win. And I should do everything I can to make sure you win. And out of that love, you should do that back the other direction, and the system works flawlessly. When it works that way, it works great.
Right.
When we start keeping track of I need to win, man, I've yet to see a case. Now, maybe the listeners out there say, we do that and it works fine. Maybe. I've yet to see a good long-term case with a married couple where that works, right? Or just any kind of relationship like that. I don't know that it's a married couple thing. I think it's just in general a relationship. I've yet to see it work when that kind of scorekeeping is being used to gauge balance.
Well, and the other thing that's fascinating when you're trying to find these play things for your own life is they're not always going to be comfortable for the people around you, right? Like you got in a pretty massive bike accident and it landed you in the hospital and having to get surgery and all of that. And I remember talking to both your mom and my mom and several of our friends. Well, at least he's not going to do that anymore, right?
Nope.
They were all blown away when I said, I'm completely supportive of him doing this. Because to them, you are now interfering with their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Right? So I think there is something to be said for respecting other people's, their own play. They're not affecting your life. They're not really injuring you. It's not hurting you in any way. Let them have their thing.
Sure. Yeah. And there's no shortage of people that'll try to hijack that from you.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and
with good
belittle whatever it is.
With good intentions.
Yeah.
Their intentions are good. They care about you, right?
Right.
But you have to decide for yourself what's good for you with regard to that.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think if you're having those issues with your spouse or where you're having problems with work life, I think balance there in whether it's in a home or your roommate or things that are not specifically work related. We're talking about this is the life part that has to be balanced as well, because that portion of time gets divided up as well. It's the portion of time that you're using for playing whatever video game. I was going to pick one particular, but it won't age well. I'd like this to be a little more evergreen. But whatever video game you're into, you're like, I want to spend 4 hours on that. Well, what about your family? That, what about your other people that you're committed to in terms of time? You've got to balance those things. And I think the key there, again, is the same things we're talking about from the work perspective apply here. Getting agreement on the boundaries, getting an agreement on the non-negotiables. So for you, that time in the morning is non-negotiable. So what I wouldn't be over here doing scorekeeping is saying, well, I want you to have breakfast with me, and we wanted blah, 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 and this is important in the morning. I'm rubbing right against the boundary conditions that you have.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. It's not fair.
Now, since this is the advanced techniques for work-life balance, I'm going to challenge you for a minute. As a manager, I'm curious. How do you handle this if you see, as you said, the wheels coming off? Or you see something coming for one of your employees, one of your reports.
It's a great question.
What do you do when somebody's pregnant and they have not, or spouse is pregnant or anything like that coming up?
Well, the tougher one that I've experienced is I've seen where I could tell that divorce was going to happen.
Right.
Like I could just tell.
Yeah.
I could tell just from the conversation I had with the person, this is not going to end well. And here's what you need to be really careful about. You can get yourself in legal trouble in a hurry trying to get involved in that business in a proactive way.
Right.
Right. That's not your business. It's not my job to go digging around in people's closets looking for skeletons.
Okay.
It's not my job. It is my job to deal with the skeleton when it reveals itself and starts to have an effect on the result. So myself and this part, we talked earlier about you need to have this results conversation with your boss. What's the finish line? Bosses out there, you need to be having that conversation with your employee too. This is what the finish line, this is what good looks like, this is what success looks like. Everything else is wide open in terms of how, maybe for you, or if it's not, you need to dictate the how, right? You come to that agreement, here's what success looks like. When it starts to have an effect on that, then you have to challenge and ask the questions. Now, how you ask those questions is where you start to get into some advanced techniques.
Okay.
Here's what you don't do. Hey, it looks like we're having some results. I'm worried about we're not going to hit the schedule. Is your relationship with your wife having an effect on this? Whoa. Whoa. Easy, Tiger. You like lawsuits? That's what you're about to get, right? You can't do that. You can't presume. You can't be rooting around in closets for skeletons. You can't. But you can ask some good questions, right? You can say, hey, I'm worried about the schedule. I'm worried. Look, we're clearly not getting to where we want to go. What's happening?
Right.
How can I help you? What's going on? And you keep poking until you get answers to the questions. The person may not want to reveal anything there.
Right.
I've had people break down, start crying about their family situations, right? And and then I can try to address, right? Now again, I'm not a counselor here, right? I'm focused on the finish line. I'm like, how can I help you so we can achieve the finish line? Now, do I care about, that part of your life? Yeah, absolutely. It's not my job to fix those. Now, I still might, give some counsel if they're directly asking, but you got to be real careful.
Right. And I look at these, I guess I would define them as kind of insurance events, anything that would affect your insurance. If you're getting married, getting divorced, having a baby, somebody dies, those type of things. If you know that's about to happen to one of your reports and they have not wrapped their brain around it, for example, your first child, you don't realize how much this is going to rock your world.
Right.
You really don't know. Do you try to help these people understand what schedule changes might need to be happening, or do you just, it affects the bottom line of the company at this point? I
don't try to address them seeing that, because my experience is that people have to see things for themselves.
Okay.
And that me telling them about what is going to happen has no impact on them. That's been my experience, is that they don't see or recognize that. Okay. They have to see it for themselves.
Okay.
So what I will do there is, I can't, again, I've already said I can't go address that. Right. That's a legal problem for me to go try to go in and say something like, hey, I see you're having it's good to see you're going to have a kid. I'm going to take all your projects away from you because you're no longer reliable. Whoa. Right. That's not the way you want to address it. But what I might do is I will adjust the schedule accordingly, or I might bring somebody in to help.
Okay.
I'm going to bring this person in just to help bolster things, because I have to make sure that finish line gets met. Right. That's not negotiable for them to. I want them to learn, but not at the expense of the results that I have to deliver. That's not an option for me. Okay. So I'll bring in somebody else to help out while they're down, or whatever situation is. I will position the team in such a way that I'm kind of got my bases covered in that regard. And then there's no legal concern there. I'm just saying, well, I'm just, making sure we've got all the coverage and we're trying to support you as best we can.
Okay.
Right?
And what if you are a manager of someone who is nonstop workaholic? do you try to help them address you need to, or do you just lead by example?
Yeah, I do both of those things. Like, and I had to learn that there's some people that are just going to be that way and they like it, right? I had an employee who was one of the best I had in terms of individual. He was just outrageously talented, and he would sit on this piece of equipment and work and write code all day. And man, I couldn't do much more than 3 hours, and I hit a wall. And I would go by and see him in the evening. They'd been there in the morning, and I'd be like, "Hey, you need to take some time, take a break. You don't have to do this all day, right?"
Right.
And that was not good advice for him. For him, he loved that.
Okay.
We were just very different personality-wise. He enjoyed that. And so you just have to realize some people are like that, and they're going to be that way, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, when you start to see the wheels coming off, when you start to see problems reveal themselves, right? Now sometimes they don't reveal themselves in the project being late or the finish line. We talked about focusing on the results. Sometimes they don't reveal themselves there. Usually where they'll reveal themselves is in their attitude. They will start to have temper issues, or you'll see them being angry, I had a boss who was really good at that. That's how it shows up for me.
Okay.
I start to get frustrated, and you'll see a certain tone from me. I'll be more caustic, a little more aggressive. And then I had a boss that was really good at detecting it and neutralizing it. You talk about, he knew he couldn't open the skeleton and go dig into things, but he could tell there's some stuff going on, right? And the way that he addressed it was, he would just say things like, "Brent, where's this hostility coming from?" Oh, I hated when he asked that question. I hated because it neutralized it. It took the leverage away from me. Let me be angry. Right. I want to be angry. And it took it away from me. And I would just be like, this is just me, man. I don't have any particular. But the fact of the matter is you're calling out this this emotion that you're observing. And that gives you the opportunity. At that point, you're kind of knocking on the door in case the skeleton wants to come out.
Right.
Now, once the skeleton's out, I can address it and deal with it.
Right.
And again, as an employer, my goal is to make sure that that's not affecting our outcome.
Right.
Right. Do I care about you as a person? Absolutely. I care about that finish line. That's that's winning. That's what I'm focused on, making sure that happens. And then separately, do I want to make sure this person's healthy and in good shape? And yeah, absolutely. But I also know that people don't want to hear what my opinion is about their marriage situation.
Right.
That's not my business.
Right.
Right. I won't give any advice there. I'll be like, yeah, are you guys considered counselors? That might be something to think about.
Right.
Somebody that can legally give you advice, because I'm focused on getting this project done on time.
Right. So my last question for you as a manager, and then I will leave you alone. Have you ever had the opportunity to either for an employee or an employer, if you've had the clear conversation with them about at 5:00 on this day, I'm not going to be answering my phone anymore, and they still call you. Do you answer that phone call and say, "Hey, I've already told you," or do you not answer that phone call?
I turn my phone off. If I've pre-negotiated with the boss that I'm going to try to shut things down after 5 today, and I get alignment on that, then I'm in airplane mode. I'll just shut the phone off.
Have you always been that way?
No, early in my career, I would answer the phone, right? And you saw firsthand what effect that has.
Right.
Right. It has a very weird effect on a person when you feel like you're on call all the time.
Right.
I don't know how to describe the effect it has, but it's not good.
Right.
Your mental happiness, your mental health deteriorates quite rapidly in that kind of culture and environment. And I have plenty of friends that work in environments like that. And one friend that he'll say, it doesn't matter what you say and what you do, you're still going to have to scramble. You're still going to have to scramble, and which to him that means you're going to have to work after, late nights, weekends, crazy stuff is going to happen. You're going to have to scramble. Peace. Okay, I can appreciate that. Why are we setting that as a default?
Right.
Why has that become like the default strategy for how we operate? Will you have to do that on occasion when you get deadlines? You bet. Absolutely. That will definitely be something that you're going to need to do. You should not set that as the default activity.
Right. And I think that the non-negotiable thing for you, I think that what I have seen over the last several years is you have learned that non-negotiables actually mean non-negotiable, not like probably non-negotiable.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not setting too many hard no's.
Sure.
But when I say a hard no, I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, and I have less non-negotiables than I used to.
Right.
I think there was a phase where I was like, all these things are non-negotiable. Because that's, in reality, is that ego-based?
And that just makes you hard to work with.
Yeah, it does, right? So I think to me now, it's like, if somebody calls me, like I had somebody call me the other day, it's after hours during holidays, and I answer the phone.
Right.
Because she don't call me very often, and I knew she needed something.
But if you were sitting down for a family dinner at that time, you wouldn't have answered that
the
call.
Phone. Not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
Right.
I'd have picked up the phone and called them here, a little bit later.
Right.
Right. But some bosses expect you to. There will be some, right? If and I think it also matters who it is, right? If it's one of your peers that's calling you, or somebody else, you may not care, not even your organization. I'll get to it when I can. Your VP calls you, you're probably answering the phone.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to answer the phone. I don't know of a case I ever haven't.
Right.
Or if I couldn't get to it, I was getting to it as fast as I could, because you never know, it might be something good.
Right. Right.
So, but in general, you're right. You need to have some boundaries. And some nights I won't. So I don't do that shut the phone off thing on all the time. But on occasion, if it's been a day and it's like, okay, I know that the neediness that people think they need me is going to continue all night.
Right.
And the only way I can, and they don't. Like I've you can't do that your first couple of years because you don't know. But after 20 years, I know, all right, these people don't need me.
Right.
They think they do.
This does not have to be solved tonight.
We do the same thing with our kids, right? The kids got something. Oh, I need this right now. No, you don't.
No. Is there blood or bone?
Yeah, you wait.
Yeah.
You'll wait. And then you come out an hour later, and what do they say? Oh, I figured it out. Right. That's what I figured.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Work-life balance 201, advanced techniques. I want to hear what other thoughts you guys have, because I think there's people out there that this is so intuitive to them that it's just no-brainer. But I'd like to hear your tips and tricks as well, and we might share those on a future episode.
And I would love to hear what your play is. What is it that you do that's just for you? Especially if it's something that nobody really knows about you. Let us hear it.
Awesome. Have a good week, folks.